So the topic of this lecture now is very different. So it's not going to be any diagrams or complicated diagrams on computer programs and all that you've seen. It's going to be on ethics, and I'm going to talk about the work that we are doing in the society, the Ethics and Society Subproject. So the Ethics and Society Subproject, it has a number of people involved in this. It is being co-directed by Jean-Pierre Changiot and Katinka Evers from Pasteur Institute and from Uppsala University. And we have Nicholas Rose from King's College, Bernd Karstenstahl from De Montfort University in Leicester, UK, and Lars Klove from the Danish Board of Technology, Christine Mitchell from Harvard Medical School, who is the Executive Director of Ethics Research there at Harvard, and we have Richard Walker also from APFL, and myself and Yadin Dudai from the Weizmann Institute, Kevin Grant from the Karolinska Institute, Barbara Sahakian from Cambridge University, and Benjamin Simonov from Pasteur, Institute Pasteur. So these are the people who are involved. In addition, they were in their groups, they have other people who are working on this, so there are more than this. For example, in Nicholas Rose's lab, there is Michael and Tara who are involved in this, and in Danish Board of Technology, there are also a number of people there, and from Uppsala University and Linnaeus University also we have Shamin Patel. So this sub-project is looking at the ethical and social consequences of the Human Brain Project. We are interested in following this up. So the Human Brain Project, as you know, is rather complicated, and you can't avoid having ethical issues there. So ethics, I like this definition from the former Chief Justice Alan Warren, who said that in civilized life, law floats in a sea of ethics. And one could say also now in science and research, it also flows in a sea of ethics. There's a lot of ethical questions, issues. And another thing that we have to know here is that you can turn away from ethical questions, but the ethics question will not go away. So we have to deal with these ethical questions. And there are dilemmas, ethical dilemmas, which are morally problematic situations where you have to pick between two or more acceptable, but often opposing alternatives that are important to different groups. Experts frequently frame this into a type of situation of right versus right decision, when it's very difficult to choose. That's when you have this dilemma. So we are into the age of neuroethics now. It's an area that is it's almost exploding. It's grown very fast. And neuroethics encompasses a wide array of ethical issues emerging from different branches of clinical neuroscience, like neurology, psychiatry, and psychopharmacology, and basic neuroscience, such as cognitive neuroscience and affective neuroscience. So these problems, neuroethical problems, they are raised by advances in, for example, functional neuroimaging, brain implants, brain-machine interfaces, and psychopharmacology, as well as by growing understanding of the neural basis of behavior and personality and consciousness. So there are a lot of these issues coming up now with the advances of neuroscience. So the goal of the HBP Ethics and Society pillar is to explore the project's social, ethical, and philosophical implications, to promote engagement with decision makers and the general public to promote social and ethical awareness among project participants, and to ensure that the project is governed in a way that ensures full compliance with relevant legal and ethical norms. So this is quite a big, rather ambitious undertaking that we have, but it is important that it is done. So the size and complexity of the HBP, as you know, and the complex and varied natures of the ethical issues raised by this project has kept us very much busy and working on these different issues. So when we started to meet in Paris in the first few months to discuss this project, we came up with a kind of a laundry list. What kind of ethical problems, issues that we could think of? So I'll list here some of those of you who were at the workshop yesterday, workshop 3, did get a test of this, but I would like to list them, the laundry list that we came up with on ethical issues. Some of them may sound like science fiction, some are rather possible. So these are the lists we had about new techniques for the control of human behavior. So the list that related to development with this human behavior. New techniques for manipulation of human memory. That was another on the list. Creation of false memories. Memory deletion. New techniques for mind reading. Do you know about this? This kind of implications. That perhaps the new techniques for the manipulation of human memory, it could be important for people who are patient with the problem of memory, but what about for, in parentheses, normal people? Can they be used? Can these techniques be used for human? Is it advisable to use them? Is it desirable?
Need to enhance learning?
Enhance learning, yes. And in case of creating false memories.
Is that one for politicians?
Pardon?
For politicians?
Yes. Memory deletion?
That's for politicians too.
What about those who are troubled by certain events?
Post-traumatic
stress, yeah. And mind reading, this sounds more like...
This is very relevant to medical imaging, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Do you think that we are approaching...
Yes.
Yeah? This is the list continues. Lie detection and application in criminal law, application in surveillance, new techniques to focus human abilities, for example, applications in education. There are some experiments that were done at Oxford where they were trying to improve learning in children by this intracranial stimulation.
I was thinking of Anders Sandberg and expanding human capacity.
Pardon?
Are you thinking of work like Anders Sandberg and
Yes.
expanding human capacity?
Yes. And assessment of criminal responsibility through brain scanning. It's being used more and more now. Is it in legal situations in the courts. It can be new techniques to forecast human behavior. So these are all the list that we came up with, that we thought of. Maybe you have also some suggestions. Here we have intrusiveness, violation of individuality, privacy and human uniqueness. Human enhancement, we mentioned that. Application of knowledge, power in society. This is a rather sensitive issue. For example, in military, police, or by commercial interest. You know that the HBP, it is mentioned in the proposal that we will not collaborate, we will not with military, those in the military. But and as you know, the United States project, the Human Brain Project, is being financed partly by DART, the defense department, and the justification there, they say, is to help those soldiers that were amputated, but would that be the only reason?
So, what are you classifying here as criminal organisations? Since we're talking about the police and the military and the espionage organisations in our nation states, are they actually criminal organisations?
It's a non-ethical question.
Sorry?
A non-ethical
No.
question.
Should they be?
You might
Yeah,
add
they're not-
insurance companies.
Yeah.
Unforeseen side effects, new ways of manipulating human behavior, and the question of informed consent also, traditional research ethics. And then an important part also is in, I think, who is a philosopher in our work, Subproject. She is focusing on philosophical aspect of this simulation. There are a number of questions there that arise also. For example, personhood, moral rights of a simulated brain. One question she was asking is, can we have a simulated brain without a body? No. Can it have a person, can it interact? Can we interact with a simulated brain? So a number of these philosophical questions that arise in this, in the HBP, we are focusing on them, like the moral rights of a simulated brain. So the key missions for the ethics and society in HBP, as I mentioned earlier, to explore the HBP's social, ethical and philosophical implications and benefits of research on the brain and its technological applications. So then we want to identify any potentially risky or troubling implications for early discussion. And another mission is to serve as an interface between the HBP community and the public's perceptions and questions. And the fourth mission is to foster HBP scientists' engagement into ethical reasoning and ensure that the HBP follows a policy of responsible innovation. And last but not least, to maintain alertness for national and regional policy updates concerning ethical research. So to handle all these things, we have formed 5 different work packages to deal with this. So there is the first work package is on forecasting innovation and its social impact. The second work package works on conceptual and philosophical issues. The third works on the public dialogue and engagement. And fourth is researcher awareness. And fifth is governance and regulation. So
Sorry, well, before we go there, any further, can I ask questions about 1 and 4 here?
Yes.
Which are probably the ones where your sub-project would need to engage with the researchers in other sub-projects. What is the mechanism that you foresee coming into play? I mean, forecasting innovation, for example, presumably you need to collect the opinions of the individual sub-projects.
Yes.
And so far, I haven't received any emails which ask me to make a wild guess about anything, but presumably they will be forthcoming at some stage.
Yes.
Are you in a position to say anything very much about how that process will take place, what ideas you have for collecting such data,
Yeah.
and of course the researcher training that we're looking down there, number 4 as well, is again something where there'd be interaction between sub-pillars, and I wondered whether you were again able to say what you had in mind for letting the researchers be aware of the issues you've discovered.
Mm-hmm. So this is, I was going to talk about. Okay. Well, maybe it will answer part of your answer, especially the research awareness, because the people who are leading this work, they've been conducting interviews with with the heads of HBP, with the researchers. They've done that.
Who are the work package leaders for 1?
They are coming.
Ah, okay, sorry,
So, work package leader for the first foresight is Nicholas Rose. And you see there, this period, that it's consulting, his lab is systematically with researchers, potential users of new technologies. So they also look in contact with civil society groups. So they develop this, they use scenarios, horizon scaling. And this is the one which serves as framework for evaluating the possible consequences. Michael, there, you are working in work package 1.
Yeah, so I'm in the Foresight Lab, and our team is, for the ramp-up phase, we're doing 3 reports on future medicine, future neuroscience, and future computing robotics. And so we're basically involved in the future medicine one first.
Okay.
And there's been some calling together a group of experts that talked about various issues from the webinar and working with SP8. So for the first one, we're primarily working with the future medicine sub-package.
So that explains why we haven't heard anything so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then in the long term, obviously, it'll also, there was an agreement amongst the sort of social scientists not to coordinate a little bit about question asking, because otherwise, you know, a few scientists would say, oh, I'd be willing to answer some questions, and they get bombarded by different people asking them too many questions, and people would, would be frustrated. But obviously, I can see it's the other way. Why haven't I heard from him?
Well, I would like to go on record as the man who provoked you into bombarding us all with forms, but.
And when he gets to the sub-packet, the researcher engagement, he talk about there's going to be a huge survey work that'll go out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are you going to talk to all sub-projects? So also, for example, I'm in the Subproject 7, so we have a performance computing platform. And that's maybe a different thing than robotics.
Yeah, so that's the sort of thing that we're going to look at in the next cycle of the Foresight report. And again, so for the longer project, we are interested in getting what people want from us in terms of researcher engagement. So that's something that this school could actually, as students, you could be very formative in sort of thinking about what you want, because as a group of students, people are from all kinds of areas in the overall HBP, but we're actually all in one space and talking to one another, whereas a lot of the HBP research units only come together once a year in Heidelberg, and some people. So I would personally be very excited to hear what people feel would be useful methods of engagement, what you want from us, what kinds of things are confusing, useful.
I mean, I know that engineers and scientists have traditionally looked at ethical issues and said, oh, it's a little box to tick. And you could take that view here, but I think it's extremely dangerous for the project, because this is a high visibility project which will attract attention, and if we misstep somewhere along the way, it's going to be highly visible. So I would recommend everybody in the room here to take the ethical issues seriously and to take advantage of the availability of some of the PhD students who are working on these issues and actively engage with them. I mean, you have the option, as I say, to treat it as a mere box ticking, but if something does go wrong, it's going to be extremely unpleasant, and so it's probably best to be aware of these things early and to take the issue seriously, given the size and public profile of the project. I don't know whether you have anything to say about that, David, but that's my view about why we should not be taking this perhaps rather more seriously than engineers and scientists would usually take such matters. Yeah? Okay.
I wonder actually, Michael, if I just could interrupt with a question, how much support you can give to the scientists involved with the project too. For instance, back in July, I got an email from a lady in Heidelberg saying we were going to do all these things in the Human Brain Project, and to her point of view, this was not acceptable. I'm fairly used to dealing with this sort of thing because I'm an experimental physiologist. We get criticism all the time for doing experiments with animals, particularly with primates, for instance. But I think when you start talking about work with humans, medical records, for instance, the problems of confidentiality, this is a problem which everybody within the project might have to deal with one day. And I wonder if the ethical pillar will be able to give any support in telling people how to reply to such inquiries. And my reaction at that time was to forward it to Karl-Heinz Meyer and ask him whether he was going to inform the ethical committee with Peter about this. Maybe you got the same mail.
Yeah, so we have it's a work package 5 for governance and regulation, and where we have these two committees. One is the Research Ethics Committee, and one is the ELSA, Ethical, Legal and Social Aspect Committee. So the Research Ethics Committee, they can help to have the researchers in HBP for advice on the ethical issues. So that there is
So the next works package is on these conceptual and philosophical issues. You mentioned this is led by Katinka Evers, and they're analyzing the conceptual implication is brain simulation, what it means to simulate the brain, and implication for understanding mindfulness, consciousness. And so Katinka is also collaborating with some projects in this, especially medical informatics also. And she has been producing papers on. So our job is mostly, and we've had a kind of a meeting symposium also on this consciousness that she organized. So the third work package is on public engagement dialogue. So this program, they want to create constructive dialogue with the general public, so that to make this HBP work transparent also, so that to involve the general public also, and private stakeholders, and to identify emerging controversies and formulating recommendations for HBP research and research priorities.
So they are using this online deliberation. That's what you were talking about, Macallan. You had this in Copenhagen.
No, with
the other one.
the stakeholders forum.
Instead, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
What are some examples of private stakeholders?
Example of private stakeholders. Yeah.
Well, I mean, generally people are like pharmaceutical companies are one example of people who are very interested. So if you mean like say private enterprise,
I'm wondering, asking towards the general public.
So I mean the stakeholders generally defined as anybody who has some kind of interest
Sure.
in the program. It will affect them, and the greater it will affect you personally. So in some sense, every member of the public is a stakeholder, but if you're a general member of the public, it wouldn't affect you as much as you might be much more interested if you're a member of the public and one of your family had a mental illness, and you thought, well, if this is a potential to solve the Alzheimer problem that affects my family, then it would be much greater as a stakeholder. So stakeholders forums tend to be people within who are representatives of communities. So you have lots of civil society and NGO groups. You would have patient groups, forums, doctors, clinicians is one of the sort of important set of stakeholders. So that, I mean, I could try and get a longer list of who we've actually talked to.
No, but I was
Those are
in terms of like official collaboration with private stakeholders, is this a part of the project? For example, pharmaceutical, I could see pharmaceutical companies being both a source of funding and also a source of problems.
I mean, there has been a lot of discussion with pharmaceutical companies. It hasn't actually come from the ethics and society group. It's mainly from administrative groups, and that's part of the issue, negotiating research partners and those types of issues. And so I'm sure that stuff comes up. Possibly Abdul to talk more about it. Some of them have ethics people who are on sort of the ethics committee and stuff.
Yes. So this is the government on regulation, the fifth, which is the one that I'm reading, and is to support HBP decision making on significant ethical and social issues to ensure that the project fully complies with the European and national legal and regulatory requirements. So as I've mentioned, we have set up two committees, the Ethical, Legal and Social Aspect Committee and the Research Ethics Committee. I will talk about these committees later. So this is a repetition what more in detail, but about the goal of the Foresight Lab, that they have conducted systematic foresight exercise to identify and evaluate the impact of these new knowledge and technologies produced by the HBP. So the exercise that they are doing, is it 20 years or is it 3-5 years? Looking ahead. To predict the emergence of medical, computing and other technologies based on HBP results. So the one that I mentioned earlier, which is Work Package 12.3, that wants to create a constructive dialogue with public and private stakeholders and with general public, maintaining an intense engagement
with points of view external to HBP, identifying emerging controversies, and formulating recommendations for HBP research and research priorities. So the work package 12.3 is the goal is to obtain rapid and well-argued feedback from the general public on the ethical and social issues. So this is very much concentrating and on the public's perception. Do you want to ask a question? Okay. So the participants will be using these online forum boards to debate ethical issues and dilemmas raised by HBP research, discoveries, and technology. And I think I will continue to. This is the one that you had, the citizen.
No, they haven't done that one. The webinars and.
The webinar. Okay, so this is the European Citizen Conventions, the goal, the public dialogue and engagement still. So the goal is to move beyond traditional debates among scientists, politicians, and interested parties, and to involve European citizens actively in HBP decision making. So over the duration of the HBP, this work package 12.3 will organize the citizen conventions dedicated to the HBP, making use of different methods for citizen engagement. And the stakeholders and expert forum. The goal is to create a forum for stakeholders and subject experts to debate and express concerns arising from HBP research, discoveries, and technologies. So these specialist discussions will be complementary to the work of Citizens Convention described in this work package. So they will use these workshops, seminars, and thematic webinars. Yes.
Is there an example for the citizen engagement? Because I'm trying to clear picture about how this could be realized and how the participants would be chosen in this engagement.
How the participant will be chosen.
What's the general form of how they will be engaging in the decision process? Will there be like surveys, or how are they engaged and how are they choosing?
Yes, there will be surveys and so on.
You could say, talk about it on Friday, but we're launching a museums program. And it's, in these museums, we'll have a way for the public to interact and give us feedback and input on the science. But it's early stage of that's what it is. So try to reach the public via neighborhood science centers and museums.
That's pretty.
It's one.
Yeah.
But I think that people at the Danish Board of Technology,
Pardon?
at the Danish Board of Technology, that's actually what they're looking at the moment, is how to reach the biggest number of people, how to select the participants.
People who go to
There's
a
sampling
museum,
issue
it's
as
also
well.
very significant special group, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, they also want to, as far as I understand, they want to get more informed participants, because it also isn't very helpful just to get kind of crazy ideas about or uninformed opinions. But I think they want to get a balance of both, and that's what I understood from them.
I mean, I'm sure, in the ramp-up phase, there are like many people in the research projects here, they're sort of formulating methods and saying, here's what we think we could do, will it work, and here's a problem we haven't figured out, how will we solve this problem? So in general, say citizens conventions, how they pick people, if it's more, some of the citizens conventions are much more focused on research, where you get a group of people together and see that what they're doing, and you're looking for what combinations of people create successful conversations where people can actually feel informed, but also feel like they have some kind of output and say. And some are more set up to be, strictly like, well, let's get a mailbox view of the public and, and go by postal address, and we've got 4 people from, a random sample. So those are, those result in different results. At some level, the citizens conventions don't involve all of the citizens. You will not have everybody in France having a public debate on the issue of the Human Brain Project, so it's always going to be a sampling of people. And then the other argument, of course, is that reaching key people who are in citizens forums, citizens groups that are representative of interests in communities, they can make the decisions for their community and say, yeah, a lot more people who are in mind, if you talk about someone from a patients group, and they are able to say, yes, that's a key issue for my patients groups, and actually we're not that worried about how you do the statistical methods, so figure that out, we don't want to debate that with you, but they might want to debate something else. So that's part of it, generally how public engagement, as you can imagine, talking with thousands of people across Europe, lots of people have been trying to figure out how to do it for years and years now, so that's what part of that sort of social science is directed at working towards engaging effective methods.
Yeah, so to come to this research awareness, this is an important work package also. Try to facilitate reflection on ethical and social issues within the HBP. And the person who is leading this is Bernd Carsten, and the method that he's doing is using in-depth interviews, surveys, and workshops. So he has started actually with the interviews. He has done a survey of HBP researchers and trying to investigate, to focus on issues that the researchers that we think are important, and to establish, he also wanted to establish links to teaching, training, and education. So the aim is, it's important that he wants to, this work package is to sustain a culture of ethical and social reflection within the HBP consortium. Yes?
Regarding research awareness, I was wondering, sometimes you do research that per se has no particular evil applications of this, for example, but then it could be used also for unethical purposes, and in this case it's not just the researcher that should think about it, but the people that will in the end, for example, own this research. So for example, in the Human Brain Project there are specific regulations, so there will be specific regulations about who owns what. If I publish something in the context of the Human Brain Project, for example, can be used in the industry, who is going to take the decision about where to use it, where to allow usage of this, and when not. It's not just up to me, it's up to whoever will own this in the end. So, and this is something which to me is a bit unclear. So ownership of copyright of what we do in the context of the Human Brain Project, especially for industrial applications or any other medical applications, whatever. is a process and a decision making which is not clear to me, and I think it's very related to these questions that you are raising.
Yeah, it needs to be made clear, but it's the scientist owns it.
Does that not vary between intellectual property?
Yeah.
Does that not vary between universities? Lots of universities, you get the
Up to
signature,
the
as soon as you get
university, then
your funding, your...
Yeah, up to the university in the scientist, but HBP doesn't own it.
It's going to be a major issue because one of the main activities is going to be creating huge databases.
Yeah.
And it is said that this database will be made
Open.
available to, yeah.
But there are several issues there. Not only who does the data belong to, but who is responsible for the data being used. Because if you produce data, you put it into the database, you absolutely have to include the necessary information about the context in which that data was obtained. Because otherwise somebody else might use it, put it into a different context, which might not be applicable or valid. And somehow you still have some sort of responsibility over what is done with the data that you produced, or do you?
Yeah, I can understand. That's the tough issue. HBP has this open policy. At the same time, we want that it should come out. The researchers should have access. That's how it has been promoted. But it's not.
But that's the goal.
Pardon?
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
It
Yeah.
needs to be communicated better. The policies need to be developed more firmly.
Yeah. Yeah, this is what in the description of work package, that this work package is encourage and foster ethical social reflection, and particularly among young researchers, clinicians, and technological developers. This is in the description of the work package. An example of these interviews that he made, Dan Custom, with these researchers in the HBP. These are the questions he gave. Some of the questions. What do you expect the HBP brain simulation to have achieved in 5, 10, and 50 years' time? What is the contribution and status of your project? The advantages, positive achievements? What do you think the public, your colleague, or other researchers will be concerned about? Okay, so this is the type of the question that he asked the researcher, but there's much more. Yeah.
Yeah, so in these questions, do you also take a historical perspective? So what I'm relating to is that when many years ago these large projects in high energy physics started, where for the first time people were collaborating on a very large scale, then of course also in this group of people lots of new social aspects became important in terms of ownership of publications, rights, but also the way of interacting, and these social aspects have been analyzed partially by historians of science like Peter Gaddison, and so I'm wondering whether somewhere in your work package you are taking this historical perspective and are trying to profit from these experiences in other fields.
Earlier we had a co-worker who was a historian of science, and we was thinking about this matter historically. But now I don't know if the person who is in charge of this whole package.
I mean, as part of my PhD project, I'm going to have to be comparing the Human Brain Project to other big science projects.
Okay.
So I've been reading Peter Gaddison and other
Historic. So this Elsa and Rek. What are Elsa and Rek? So this is the work package that I'm leading, the work package 12.5. So the goal first was to form these, to set up these committees, ELSA, which is the Ethical, Legal and Social Aspect Committee, and REC, the Research Ethics Committee. So ELSA, it has this strategic oversight over ethical, legal and social issues arising from the HBP research. So they are quite high in the hierarchy of this HBP, so they will advise the General Assembly, the Government Board, the Executive Board, so acting on their own initiative in response to a specific request. So this committee may also formulate recommendations for national and European regulators and raise issues it believes should be the object of broad public debate. So ELSA looks more into the future ahead. What are the implications of different ethical issues? While REC, it's more concrete. It has to do with the current experiments being done in the Human Brain Project. So it is independent of ELSA, this Research Ethics Committee, will help the partners to ensure that HBP research meets the highest possible ethical standards and it complies with all relevant European, national, as well as with the deontological standards imposed by relevant professional bodies. Now I wrote, you see that it complies with all relevant European, but now the word all has been removed there, because those who sit on the ethics committee, on the REC committee, they pointed out that they do not know all the relevant European laws. And they have to have an expert there in legal, a legal expert in their committee. So they have to have someone in competency in law, medicine, medical research, and animal experimentation. Yes.
Is this going to be mandatory for whoever does, for example, experiments in the context of the Human Brain Project to approach this committee, or will it be like a help provided for?
Yeah, it's more of a help. It's not mandatory to approach them, but if you have questions, advice, you need advice for certain. That's the function of REC, one of the functions of REC. So here it is that I repeated. This is something that help partners to ensure that HBP research their strategies include the REC strategies, preparing and revising guidelines. Here it is, responding to researcher queries. That's one of their functions. And reviewing some of these ethical application. So they have reviewed all the members, the participants in the HBP, they have already received their ethical. They have to have ethical applications. So REC does not have to review it. But if there are some special cases where they need these researchers need some, then they can help in that. And they have reviewed some of the application that was sent for these open calls. And they came with some suggestions, some advices, some questions, which researchers, those who applied, had to answer. But one important thing I have to emphasize here is that their role is not like policing, rather, trying to stop or something. Rather, it's more like to help the researchers in HBP. And they are supported by permanent staff, which is based here in Sweden, at the Näs University. And one of their mission also is that they track changes in national and European regulation And they provide regular information on these changes to committee members and to HBP research groups. And then they will maintain a website for this, the database of all these ethical applications. They will be, so we have all these ethical applications that the researchers have sent from the Human Brain Project, and it's mainly the SP1, which is the mouse, strategic mouse data, and then SP2, the human brain data, and there was SP3, cognitive architecture, and then the medical informatics. So there are these 4 sub-projects that I have sent in. We have a database of all these applications. Most of the people in other theoretical neuroscience, of course, don't need it. We didn't see very much in robotics, so they just stick to many of these other, like a neuromorphic sub-project and neuroinformatics. They didn't take any of these ethical permits. So the ELSA, which is the ethical, legal, social aspect review, they have to deal with raising issues that they should be more broadly and publicly debated. So, like they are having a working group on human simulation, brain simulation, for example, on brain banking. So these are things that ELSA are dealing with. And this membership, they will be in office for 5 years, and if they think that there's something missing, the competency, they can try to fill that in by trying to get an additional member. So they have their own agenda. They have their chairman and the vice chairman, and as I said, they formulate draft recommendations which committee will formally adopt, and they organize hearing if it is useful to work, and there are also interaction between these groups, between ELSA and BRAC. So there are linkages working together, and also BRAC, it has linkages with different, in our own sub-project, like the one on research awareness. They want to work together, and there was also on, the work package 1 also. So there's a lot of these co-linkages between these different work packages and sub-projects. So these are the people that you can see that they have different professions. And the members of ELSA, you have a Spanish biologist, and then there's a bioethicist, Nicola Andorra, and then a Norwegian sociologist, and Marcus Christian, Swiss neuroethicist, and neurorobotics, one in neurorobotics, Matsuzaki. It's quite a long list of names. We also have this robo-ethicist from Italy, and then there's Joël Proust, French philosopher, and Stefano Lodato is the expert in law and human rights. And then we have the neuropathologist. So these are the members of the ELSA group. And the REC group, there are 6. So this is continued. You see, it's quite a long list of ELSA. Julian Savulescu, British neuroethicist, Jean-Dominique Vasali, who is director at Geneva University, and then we have an economist, then a philosopher. So you see that it's a wide the expertise is rather broad here in ELSA. They can cover a number of different subjects. And with the REG, there are 6 members, and they also have different backgrounds, different expertise. A veterinarian, Karin Blumer, and developmental biologist, Margaret Buckingham, and then Jörg Kesselring, who is a neurologist, and Miguel Medina, you know him, he's from Spain, biochemist and molecular biologist. And then we have an animal, who is Melita. She's, her expertise is in veterinary and animal research. And we have Henrik Walter. So even in black, you see that the expertise is rather broad. And these are the people who are supporting, who are helping this REC and ELSA. So we have this secretariat in Sweden. It's at Linnaeus University and the Karolinska Institute. It's me and then Christine Mitchell and Barbara Sahakian and Kevin Grant, who are, our job is to support this ELSA and REC. So we help them organizing these meetings that they do. Right now they will have meetings in Heidelberg, both of them, and they will be meeting also with different members, sub-project members. So if you are there in Heidelberg and you have some ethical issues you need to discuss with them, they will be there or advise, the REC and the ELSA. So we continue with the issues of HBP arising. So what animals used in HBP, now it's mostly rodents. It's primarily rodents. And I think this work is done in by the group in Javier de Felipe in Spain, and in Edinburgh, in the group of Seth Grant. So they are providing, they are going to provide a map, an atlas, multi-level organization of the mouse brain and brain function and cognitive architecture. We have written here in other species, but now it's mostly, primarily going to be in rodents. There has been discussion about these primates, but now it's they are not going to be used, the non-human primates, in the core project. But there is a possibility of them being used in partnering projects. And but the partners, those who are going to use the primates, they have to they will have to come with justification, and they should have themselves arrange, try to get the ethical. But in the HBP, that there won't be now continuous work on non-human primates. Is that you are reading also, Kashti?
I'm saying nothing.
What about?
Maybe, excuse me, I think that there is an ethical issue here too, which concerns experimentation, but even people who are using data which has been put into databases. One of the European rules, for instance, is that you're not allowed to subcontract work which you're not allowed to do within the European Union to countries where there is no rule governing what you can do. For instance, you can't say, well, I want to test this drug, but I can't do it in Europe, so I'll do it in Africa instead. The same is true maybe within a project like this. Here we are not going to consider work using non-human primates. On the other hand, the partner projects may be doing that, and the data will go into the database. So is there an ethical problem here or not? Presumably the partnering projects, if they're done within Europe, will have conformed to the European ethical requirements. On the other hand, the requirements in Japan are quite different, wherever the work will be done. So this is something we need to consider when we're using data, that the validity of the ethical reasoning is there. Sorry, we're going to talk to somebody else.
No, I think that's a really important point. That has to be worked out. It's complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true what you mentioned about doing work on primates in other countries, that it's not allowed, for example, here in Britain, but there are some researchers who have tried to do this in a country like Kenya, Institute of Climate Research, and in West Indies also, is a research institute on climates there. But I think now it's becoming difficult to do that also. In Britain, for example, so now that you cannot do this anymore. If you are not allowed to do primates work in Britain, you cannot do it in Kenya, West Africa.
The idea of using the data that's like for Japan's data, for example, Europe needs to have a more detailed policy on how the human rights project can or cannot use it.
But as a very specific example, take what Sonia said in her talk this morning, that she had data from spike trains recorded from monkeys, and she had some communication problem with the experimental group that she was working with. So they provided her with data which was 10 years old. She said she could not use this because it didn't fit the requirements of her statistical analyses. So she then went to do the experiments with them. So here she is needing to produce new data, but it says, believe clearly, that new data will not be being produced within the project from primates, for instance. So this is a problem which we need to be thinking about.
So you can use data that has been obtained.
Well, several people have raised this problem, I think, on the first day when we were talking, even that there needs to be, if you're going to put data into databases, there has to be some sort of unified format for entering the data on a given topic, or correlating data which has come from different sources. Well, it could be a very long discussion, so I won't go into that.
As far as I understand, I mean, I don't think you can use data that doesn't comply with the regulations of the European Commission. I mean, so even if it's been collected in a different country, you still can't use it if it doesn't comply with the regulations.
How are you going to
That's
stop
at
it
least
going into
what
the database if somebody decides to put it in there?
But they can't.
Why not?
I mean, that's what I understood from the meetings that we had in Paris, is that you just can't use data if it doesn't comply with the ethical regulations within
One
Europe.
word is what you're saying is can't. What is preventing you from doing it?
And how would you know? That's a good question.
I mean, I guess that depends on if what kind of supervision there is with the database management.
Who is supervising?
That's something.
I mean, if you need a certain approval number which you need to enter in order to submit the data to the database, maybe this would be a control, but I don't know whether this would be happening.
I mean, I don't think they figured out yet how they're going to manage the database.
But then what happens if the regulation is different from country to country? This is also an issue.
This is what we just discussed.
Yeah.
This is a very difficult problem to solve.
You could get an approval number in France, but it might be not complying. Even so, it could not solve the problem.
No, I thought of a HBP approval number.
Yeah,
I'm
this
sorry,
is
just
quite
one
a-
point of clarification. By ethical review boards, do you refer to ELSA and REC, like within the Human Brain Project, or ethical review boards among different participating institutions?
It's different, but where, in what sense?
Well, the last sentence said that all
Yeah.
processes within the project must comply
It's not
with.
ELSA, but
So different ethical review boards among institutions.
yes. Yeah, this question of having different countries having different standards of these ethical reviews, it's quite tricky. And, but it is. For example, now in this project, there is in the mouse SP1. There is also a participant from China. And they have sent also the ethical permits. They have the permit.
But then you consider is the ethical regulation in China the same as in Europe? So you have to actually ask them to say that what they're going to do meets the 2010 directive for animal experimentation, for instance, by the European Union.
It sounds like your group is going to be quite busy.
She was telling me that she doesn't envy me. Yeah, so we have
I would just point out with this sort of issue there, I mean, there's kind of two issues. One is sort of specific compliance with the law, and that's not an issue that's decided by the ethics committee, that's decided by the law and by the management, who will be very annoyed if people break the law. But the other issues, of course, is just sort of, how do different types of experimentation with human primates affect methods? When are they valuable? What does it mean if some people in the research community or the public think it's fine, and then some people in the research community don't? So how do you, as a scientific community, come up with decisions about what is an appropriate method and when is it necessary? Or, if you find that surveys of public opinion will say, oh, we don't think it's good to do experimentation on non-human primates for curiosity research, but for medical research that shows a clear chance, then it is a good issue. So there's another comment besides just this conversation, which is like, well, are we in compliance with legal requirements? There's also a discussion amongst the scientific community about how people feel about what the ethical issues, and that's something that I don't think the scientific community needs to come to a common answer always, but just in terms of the ethics and society work packages, one of the things that we're hoping to do is facilitate some of those conversations, and it's not that we're coming with answers. Those are, again, questions that the people in the Human Brain Project will have to come up with. And for this, for this school, as students, it's a great thing for people to think about themselves, what they feel about. And again, people are going to have different opinions. There's not a point where we have to come up with a common statement, but it's something for people to know the debates and answers.
That's a good way to introduce Colin Blackmore. He's a researcher who has been very active in the custody, so has problem with people against animal experiments, and he has these list suggestions, these arguments about ethical issues surrounding animal use. He has been very much attacked for his experiments.
Just maybe so people know the seriousness of the attack. Colin Blakemore has had letter bombs delivered to his house, picked up by his daughter, for instance. It's potentially a very dangerous situation. almost all people who have done experimentation using animals sometime during their career have had personal attacks. For instance, telephone calls saying, we know where your children go to school, we will meet them when they come out of school. Another friend of mine had a bomb under his car which fell off and damaged the hand of a child who was being pushed past in a stroller. So you have to somehow address these horrible situations.
And he has been, we're calling Blackmore, a very distinguished neuroscientist, and he has been brave enough to meet and debate in spite of all these attacks. And so these are the points he has presented, that the particular issues surrounding animal use in neuroscience, the models of nervous system disease often involve modeling behavioral and emotional phenotypes. And these animal models are used in such research on addiction, depression, anxiety, and fear, and may be problematic. And one thing is that is often thought of is about pain, which is normally avoided in the disarm experiment. It's an important topic of study. There's a lot of work on pain research. And modification of sensory experience may be considered a form of suffering. And then we come to the non-human primates. It's pointing out clearly here that non-human primates are preferred subjects for work on high-level sensory, cognitive, and motor function. And the research often involves methodology, food and water deprivation, and prolonged or repetitive procedures. So still he has argued that it's, in spite of all these things, that it is, we have to do researchers work on animals. There's still some experiments that have to be done. There is no other. When people talk about alternative methods, and they are trying, but still work on animal is essential. What do you think? You all seem to agree with me.
Well, one thing we see within the project, in its recent versions, seems to me to be a move towards, for instance, future neuroscience being in silico. This may be a great tool. Maybe we also need feedback to existing or possibly new experimental data. Certainly to take on board the results from the anatomical atlases, which are going to be used. I think if you go to the public forum, this is going to be a great communication problem, because very often the most vociferous people are those who are very strongly affected. For instance, those who have family members who suffer from neuropathologies, for instance, or who would benefit from robotic applications, for instance, to recover some function for blind people or for people who are deaf. But there is a very vociferous population as well who find all of this approach unethical and not acceptable. And so, how do you weigh public opinion here? You're saying choosing between right and right. So maybe it's right, you should not use animals to do experiments, or you should not use data from human patients, because maybe they're not able to give informed consent. Or do you say then that you need to do these experiments in order to progress in medicine, for instance, or in other fields? So it really is a right and right. Which population do you choose? Because for one population it's right, and for the other it's wrong, actually.
So you have to make a decision there. An ethical
And you have to ask yourself, who am I to make that decision?
Yeah, it's tough. But the HBP, they depend a lot on this work that's done in-house. The information that is going to come out in these atlases. Don't you think so? I mean, it is
Well, yes, but the master is the exception.
yes, but there are still a lot of similarities
Maybe.
at molecular level, chemical level,
But,
so on between mice and men.
Going beyond that, you're also looking at the applications. What are you going to do with the knowledge which you have produced? And how are you going to control the use of that knowledge, which is something you referred to earlier? I'm sure this concerns everybody in the room. I should stop talking and let other people ask questions.
Yeah. Anyone wants to comment or questions?
To me, an issue related to that, or that could partly cover the ethical aims, is data sharing, which is also an important issue in the human brain project. Because in a way, I do agree with Constant that today we do experiments somehow in an uncontrolled way. So if I need to publish a paper and I just need my 10 rats, somehow I will be able to get my 10 rats, or 20 or 100 or whatever, and kill them, publish my data, publish my paper, and then those data are put in the drawer and no one will ever use them again. And then the person next door is doing the very same experiment with the very same purpose, just publishing about different features of the data. And data sharing, I do see it as a major way of reducing, I would say drastically, the problem of like killing thousands, hundreds of thousands of animals a year. Of course, it poses a huge challenge. It's probably one of the most complicated issues to be addressed in the project. But we should maybe think about constraining ourselves to that.
Yeah, that is one of the things that the HBP also wants. You talk about the 3 R's, is it? You know the 3 R's in experiment? We reduce, refine, and replace. So the HBP is aiming for that also. It's included in the description. And that is what the EU also wants. You should apply. They will bring up these 3 R's. That try to not to duplicate the experiments and to use a more refined method for the well-being of the animals, and avoidance of pain and making it more comfortable for them. So this is a very important thing that we have to think about whenever we do this work about the 3 R's. It is written. Is it written in stone? In the European Union, they insist that these 3 R's should be.
I also think it's impossible to expect the ethics in society group to kind of solve ethical dilemmas that have been around for years and years and years. I mean, some are going. Ethical dilemmas are exactly
it's
that.
Like Sebastian, it's like philosophical questions. Sebastian, is it like philosophical questions? They are all around. They've been around for, is it 2,000 years, and they will still be around.
2,500 years at least.
Yeah. So these ethical questions, we cannot solve all these dilemmas, but it doesn't mean that we can't think about them to come to a kind of decisions. Even if we have to choose between right and right, we have to come to a decision where we choose between right, if we think it's ethical, and wrong, which is we think it's unethical or illegal. but it's a very thin line, yeah, understand it's difficult. That's the nature of ethics, and as I showed earlier, also said that the ethics question, you can run away from the ethics question, but they will not go away. The question will remain there.
I think because the Human Brain Project has such an important mission to involve the public or to outreach to the public, then you need maybe the expertise of the communication cell of this project to help you express the importance or address the questions simply which the public may ask.
But I have said there has been quite an interest in the public.
I'm sure.
Yeah, they've been asking questions on HBP and.
So what ethical questions have you had to deal with so far?
Some of them rather difficult questions, like are you going to HBP simulate the brain in 10 years? That was a bit some misconception in the way it was. Some rather tough questions. But also, will that help in finding the cure for neurodegenerative diseases? To understanding of the brain.
I'd be interested in people thinking about the ethics issues also as method issues in science. If data sharing is actually a part of the methods, and people, I mean, why don't people share data in many cases? And sometimes it's like, well, if you share your data, someone else might publish on it and you don't get a reward. And so you look at the incentive structures in science. And of course, the original beginning of science, the sort of Enlightenment vision of science was like, oh, by sharing knowledge, we'll build a common humanity and be able to forward knowledge. And oftentimes the way science is done is actually not that way at all. And it would be interesting to think when what happens when the so-called ethical issues come up, and they're actually really method issues in terms of how people can do better science and organize science policy in such a way that the rewards for people's individual careers are structured so that you can cooperate. That's actually usually a great thing in science, is to be able to cooperate. And so I wonder at what times what seems like an ethics issue is actually a method issue about how to do good science, and projects can make contributions to the future of science by thinking about solving some of these problems, or minimizing where the debate and controversy is.
So can you make that into a research project of your own, for instance, to see how it will evolve over the time course of the 10 years of the project? To see how scientific production, I don't know how you measure that really, but how it might evolve over the 10 years as people learn to communicate, to collaborate, particularly in an interdisciplinary manner.
In terms of science policy issues, those kinds of things do come up in our research program, and it's also the sort of thing that the feedback mechanism for people saying within the other science projects saying, well, what are the social science ethics and society people most interested in? We want to hear about these issues. That's something that is great to say. People want to hear those types of strategies.
Hmm?
And it's generally like one of the findings of doing the ethics and society research is that, like the first social scientists who went out and said, okay, tried to figure out this and thought that scientists don't think about these issues, was actually discovered they were quite wrong, that scientists do think a lot about these issues, and some of these issues have solutions, and when people are joined up, they can happen. So a lot of times we see this as facilitation research, facilitating the different scientific communities having these conversations and making decisions about what they want to do, and implementing those plans.
So I think I heard you talking yesterday about CERN or Human Brain Project. Sorry, the Human Genome Project.
Yeah, just as it was one of the precursors for big science, and this is deemed to be a big science project.
So one thing we might think about is how does the structure of the Human Brain Project relate to the big projects in these other, well, particularly the Human Genome Project, but also the big projects going on in CERN.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because so far the Human Brain Projects, in terms of the sort of science policy issues, haven't really come up a huge amount in terms of that we're sort of studying science policy. There isn't a specific part of these work projects in ethics and society they're focused on the policy, but generally the scientific community is really very interested in science policy. I mean, not everybody. Lots of people are like, no, I want to do statistics in my lab, and that is the coolest thing on earth, and I don't care about science policy. But sometimes you get lots of people who are quite interested in how the European Union functions on science policy, and that might be a direction that things could go if people in the scientific community were interested in that.
Okay, so there's about the refinement, but the 3 R's. This is in the Human Brain Projects, where you see that there is emphasis that they will employ these 3 R's, reduction, reducing the number of animals, and refining the methods to reduce animal suffering. So maybe you have any other questions or comments? We can stop here. Okay, I think it's time for lunch. Thank you.